What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. So Pokemon history might have just been changed forever with the introduction of the new Pokemon, Wiglett, in the Paldea region. But it's a revolutionary revelation because it is not a regional variant. Otherwise, it would have just been called Paldean Diglett, since we have had confirmation on regional forms already with Wooper being here. So this garden eel Pokemon is in a completely separate category. And the fact that it is an eel is very interesting since Diglett is a mole, so despite design similarities, these are drastically different species. So assuming that this isn't some weird one-off fluke of the Pokemon world, could we see many more new Pokemon that are familiar yet distinct? For example, we have had penguin Pokemon before, but we've never quite had a puffin, which is totally different. But instead of using a penguin that we've already seen, we could just take it from another kind of bird altogether. So when looking at all of the many flying types out there, I'm thinking that we could easily see inspiration from the Pokemon Rufflet in a puffin form. All you gotta do is paint it black and then maybe replace the feather with some of those tufts on its head, and then add on its distinctive beak. Just throw on the trademark massive head that immediately identifies it as a Rufflet, and then I think that Pufflet would be perfect. Now, these birds do still fly in real life, so we could have that be the case here, but I don't think it would be necessary, as we could just have it be an ice or even water-type bird that you could just find chilling by the ocean on some rocks. And like Diglett itself having a heavy focus across multiple recent generations, Rufflet 2 got a fresh spotlight in the Hisui region, so a puffin offshoot could evolve in a totally different way from either Braviary that we've had. That might not sound as impressive since they are both birds. To truly emulate Wiglett, we would need to really branch out into something else entirely. So what are we really looking at here? Well, imagine, say instead of a standard Litwick line who was based around flames, we had Pokemon that became based around more modern light sources, like light bulbs. Instead of a candle, we get a standard bulb in the form of Lightwick, who could then evolve into an actual lamp if we want, or something different like construction lighting or even a traffic light. Definitely becoming an electric type, but also likely gaining steel as well. But then we could do something completely altered for the Chandelure stand-in, like say a string of Christmas lights. Honestly, we could just axe it all together, but people would probably feel a little cheated if a previously 3-stage line got less. However, that's the thing. It's not actually the same Pokemon, they're just similar. So even if there were some convergent evolution going on to get here, that doesn't mean that they can't then diverge after that, because I don't really expect to see a Wug trio, since that would just be a little too easy. Now, the looks of the Pokemon are not the only things in common, they also share a theme in that they burrow underground. So what other Pokemon concepts are rich enough to be adapted again successfully? Well, since we don't really have a sound type, I'm always glad to see Pokemon based around it. So Toxtricity was an interesting choice, and not just for its unique type combination, but a Pokemon that uses its own organs as rock instruments? That's pretty great, but where do we go from here? Well, starting in the base stage, we could get another kind of Toxel, but maybe this time it's a fire type. Still based around sound, but its temper tantrums could raise its body temperature. Maybe call it Roxel, like for rock and roll? I don't know, that kind of makes it sound like it'll turn into a rock type. But once it evolves, I think it could gain this steel type. Mostly because of the funny jokes about how metal it is, but I think that it would mesh well with the Keytar that I'm putting at the end of its tail, having an alternate instrument of choice from what we knew. And maybe even some extra arms to really rock out. Basically just imagine Randall from Monsters Inc. here. Also, Fire and Steel really needs to be seen again outside of a lackluster legend like Heatran, so pairing that with such a radically different method of creating sound, I think such a Pokemon would rationalize its own existence while giving Toxtricity some great band partners. Now, we're getting a bit into the weeds here on this one, so stick with me. So, I'm envisioning another Pokemon like Cubone in that they wear the skull of another, except this time it would be a little baby moose. We are in dire need of a moose Pokemon, so having an offshoot Cubone-like quadruped with just the start of some antlers on the horns would be so interesting. We could call it Alcibone, from the Latin Alcis, which is the classification of the moose. And then of course the evolution would be spectacular as a fully developed moose with the giant antlers and everything. except that it would basically just be a skeleton. Probably not just fully bones, I mean it could have a little meat on it, but I do think that it should be a ghost type in both of its forms. You can't tell me that a skeletal Cubone moose that is a physical ghost type wouldn't be both awesome and beloved by the fans. This is exactly the kind of thing that the new Wiglett-style Pokémon could provide, while not taking away anything from the originals. But I do think a really valuable way to embrace this sort of idea would be to include some of our own ancient myths. In this case, I'm thinking of a Chimera. We could have gone with a griffin or a manticore, but I wanted to specifically highlight the colloquial meaning of Chimera as an amalgamation of different things. See, in my mind, this would be a perfect way to get a redo of sorts with type Null. As it stands, this creature made by the Aether Foundation is clearly made up of different parts, but they seem to be intentionally obscured as to what their origins are. And indeed, they seem to be no Pokemon that we have witnessed to date. Anyone who says they know where these parts are from is lying. So what if instead we got such a mixed creature, but from Pokemon that we do know? A standard Chimera is generally comprised of a lion's head, a snake for a tail, and then for some reason a goat head in the middle. But what if we used the head of a Pyroar on this creature? We could change up the colors and make it green or something if we have to, and then what if we used an Ekans as its tail? We could then also use a Go-Goat head in the middle if we want, but then maybe to make it look a little less goofy, we could just use the back legs and the hindquarters, and maybe some horns on top of the lion's head to tie it all together. Also, some Chimera are depicted with reptilian-type wings, so maybe we could add on some Charizard parts to top it off? Or maybe even Mega Charizard style. Or this Pokemon could be even more similar to type Null and evolve, so that we could save the wings for the second stage if you like, so that there's an actual major difference once you become good enough friends. Now, this wouldn't have to be a legendary Pokemon, but it certainly could be if type Null gets to count, especially with it being based around a real-world legend. I don't think it can be overstated how exciting it would be to have a mashed-up organism with attributes from Pokemon that we actually know. I mean, that was what made Chimeramon so captivating and so terrifying. And that terror may translate to a legendary Chimera Pokemon as well, but I do have faith that they could smoothly combine all of the elements together in an appealing manner. But honestly, it is a little bit difficult to determine what to do with this kind of idea, since thus far we have only seen one example of it in Gen 9. I do expect there to be at least some more of them in Scarlet and Violet, but definitely at some point again later in this generation. And it is so exciting to have Pokemon that are so close, yet not actually related. It's just another in a line of real substantial changes that Pokemon has been implementing. First with regional variants, then with alternate evolutions to those variations, and now this. These changes are considerably more impactful to the overall franchise than any Mega, Z-Move, or Terra type could ever hope to be. And we gather all of this from a little wormy thing with a funny face. What Pokemon do you think could get the Wiglett treatment? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.